one of the best quotes I've ever heard. It stuck with me. And I'm going to drop an F-bomb here, but he said, it's hard to be mentally tough when you're fucking miserable. If you're not geared up properly and have everything you need to be out there in those conditions, it doesn't matter how mentally tough you are. Being mentally tough when you're freezing your nads off is pretty darn challenging.
Hey, welcome to Muley Monday. If you're obsessed with chasing mule deer, join us every Monday morning as we dive into all kinds of mule deer hunting. From high mountain backcountry to the desert flats, and everyone from the pros to average DIY guys. We're going to share some amazing hunting stories, tactics, conservation issues, and even tips on gear for your next adventure. This is the Rich Outdoors Muley Monday. This episode is brought to you by GoHunt.com. GoHunt's Insider Membership is a membership that gives you access to so many tools to help you become a better hunter. I know you guys hear me talk about this all the time, and you probably hear it on every other podcast too, but if you're not a member yet, you're missing out on a great resource. GoHunt.com is easily one of my favorite tools for finding and researching hunts, but it's so much more than that. Having access to the knowledge base and articles is super valuable. And when you become a member, you get even more benefits like points back on gear from the Go Hunt Gear Shop. Heck, just the prices at the gear shop alone are worth the membership. Go Hunt is currently offering a free trial. So if you've always wondered if this Go Hunt thing is worth the money, now is your chance to test it out for free. Try it out and I promise you will be hooked. This tool will save you so much time and effort on researching hunts, not to mention you will find hunts that you never even knew about. Just go to gohunt.com/TRO and sign up for a free trial. If you sign up for a free trial, I'll send you a TRO podcast decal and I'll send you the tutorial on how I use Go Hunt to find hidden gem units. That's gohunt.com/TRO. Today's podcast brought to you by Solo Targets. Solo Targets are life-size, ultra-realistic 2D targets. And I have been obsessed with the Solo Targets and love the realism of having to pick a spot on an animal and not just shoot a dot on a block. The Solo Targets, you can turn any block into a ultra-realistic hunting scenario for much, much cheaper than a 3D target. And preferably, I think I prefer them over shooting a 3D target. I also really like that all the targets are actually life size, which really gives you a feel for what an animal is going to look like in your sights at different yardages. I just got the new mule deer buck target and the thing is badass. The target alone will give you buck fever. It's a giant buck. We set it up in the field and with just a small block target behind it, which is so it adds that realistic pressure of having to hit the vitals, because if you hit anywhere else, you're not going to hit the block that's behind it. It is so fun. Just that added little bit of pressure makes you really hone in on that target, and it adds to that little buck fever scenario, puts the pressure on, so to speak. Head over to solotargets.com, check them out. Awesome. They got elk targets, they got antelope targets, mule deer targets, all kinds of cool stuff, sheep, bear, all kinds of great targets. Use the Rich Outdoors promo code TRO and you'll get 20% off your new badass target system. Alrighty, Mike, welcome to Muley Monday. I haven't had the opportunity to have you on yet, and so I'm pretty excited. I got your guys' book. You and David did the Edge book, and I told David a year ago one of his books is actually the one that got me mostly into high country, backcountry hunting, so to speak, and even mule deer. So this book, man, you guys crushed it. It's awesome. Can't thank you enough. Excited to kind of pick your brain. So thanks for being on.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too. This project that David and I undertook, he was starting it out on his own, and he called me up one evening and said, "Hey, I'm having trouble finishing this, and I want some help." And I was thinking we ought to do this together, and I said, well, let me get back to you on that. I'm going to mull it over for a little while. So we called him back, and I made the commitment, and I thought we have a good product. Actually, better than good. It's a pretty unusual combination of two guys, two styles, and two guys that have kind of excelled in different paths hunting mule deer. But we put it together, and I think it's a very interesting approach for people to read.
No, that's what I really like about it is, it kind of goes through a lot of not only is it your two guys' perspectives, but, there's a lot of other guys in here, a lot of guys that have been on the podcast. And so there's a lot of different approaches, a lot of insights from a lot of different people. Then it's called The Complete Approach to Hunting Mountain Mule Deer. And it's definitely a complete approach. And man, it's an awesome book, like I said. So I can't wait to pick your brain. Like you said, your style is a little bit different than David's. I mean, you do spend a lot of time, I call it the high country, but chasing bucks, and been very successful. But for those who don't know, why don't you give us a little bit of background and kind of some of your history?
Well, my history is I've been a Colorado resident since 1988, and I was a young man and living in California, and came from a broken home, and my mom moved away from Minnesota where I was born, and spent some time in Arizona, then on to California, and there was always a lure of Colorado for me, even when I was a little kid. I still remember camping with my mom at a little creek right outside of Silverton, Colorado, and this place just it felt like where I wanted to be, and it was home. And so, I realize I'm not a native, and that's a real cool term. And people that live here in Montana, Wyoming, the native Montanans and all that, they take pride in it and all that. But I look at it as I made a conscious choice as a sentient human to get up and move away from my family and my friends and come to the place that held my heart. So that's I think there's something to be said for guys like you and me that actually make a choice to go live somewhere as opposed to just being there by happenstance. So it takes a little bit to uproot yourself as a young person and go that way, but I did, and arrived here 1988 and started after it.
So back in 1988 was how much was hunting a part of it? How much did you do? I mean, how did that come about, and how serious were you about it back then, and how much has that grown?
98.5% was hunting.
Okay.
So that was it was the major motivating factor for me. And for me, it's always been mule deer. And elk weren't a big deal back then. It's the elk populations in Colorado weren't that great. It was, you had to work hard to find a raghorn, and Utah's elk explosion hadn't occurred yet, and it just wasn't even a big thought for me. Was hunting elk was just maybe I'd have a chance and shoot a raghorn now and then, and that was where my focus was all mule deer. And so I'd been reading the articles and books since I was a kid, and it was always the mule deer motivation for me. And so when I came here, it was just I started out and got kicked in the teeth more times than I could even tell you, and trying to learn it and figure it out. And it wasn't, it probably took a good 10 years for it really to click, where I started having some success. It was, it wasn't easy. And so, the mule deer populations were down, and we had trouble finding and killing good bucks in this state at that point. And it was a change in management that really started providing success for a lot of guys, and myself included.
Do you have any early Did you have any early mentors in those first few years?
Not out here, really. It was all learning on my own. When back in California, there was a guy by the name of Gordon Wanacott, and he was his wife worked for my mom and stepdad at the little clothing store they owned in the small town of Tehachapi I grew up in. And Gordon, he was one of those guys back in the 50s that was going to San Juan Elk Ridge in Utah and hunting deep canyons and pulling out giant bucks. He was hunting the strip back before it really became a big limiting factor as far as getting licenses. And so he had a house full of big bucks, and he was, somewhat of a mentor and a hero to me as a kid. And so he's still an important part of my life today, but he really put me on the path to it.
So what were some of the early mistakes that you made? Do you remember any specific times or specific moments where you just felt like you had no idea what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Hunting winter range when there weren't any deer there.
Man, there was just so many bucks here a few months ago.
Oh yeah. It was just I figured there had to be some big resident bucks in that stuff, and all I needed to do was go 1,000 feet higher and 2 miles away up into the Quakies, and there'd be deer all over the place. But not me. I'm creeping around the pinyon junipers and rim rocks, and honestly, I was kind of following a lot of the stuff that Kurt Darner had laid out in his book, and it's just there's quite a bit of manufactured BS in there, and I'm just it took me a little while to learn and figure out what was really going on. So yeah, that was probably the major mistake, was hunting too low and in places that just didn't have any resident deer. So,
yeah.
It was a learning process, and success didn't come easy. There weren't a lot of deer around, and it wasn't until, like I said, the late 90s when the management really changed, and the limitation of tags and the statewide allocations of limited buck tags. So that really changed the dynamics of deer hunting here in Colorado.
So in 30 years of hunting, how has your style morphed, and like, what is your style today?
My style today is, I'm really not hung up on anything other than trying to find and kill old bucks. And I think probably the most important thing is I'm willing to go home empty-handed. Mm-hmm. And most people think I consistently kill big bucks, but I think you'd be surprised to know that in the last 10 years, I've only killed 2 mule deer.
Wow, really?
It's not for a lack of trying, but it is for a lack of pulling the trigger. I've had bucks in my scope that I probably should have shot. Well, I know I should have shot, but it comes to a point in time where I'm looking for something, and my standards were too high after I killed my giant in 2006. I really had a dry spell for a few years, thinking, I'm at this next level. I'm going to keep looking for this kind of buck. Well, I was hunting for unicorns and and passing up some serious deer along the way. And it's not like I regret passing those deer up, but it was just it was one of those things that I had set my standards high, and I was willing to go eat tag soup all winter.
Yeah, no, I think you get to a point where you enjoy the process more than anything. And I don't know that, you don't really, once you've killed enough big critters, I guess, I'm not speaking from experience by any stretch of imagination, but I think you get to a point where you enjoy the process as much as, harvesting an animal and just being out there and spending the time. And like, to me, not pulling the trigger, say on an elk or something, it means I get to hunt one more day and see what's over the next ridge and see what's, over the next canyon or whatever it may be, and get to spend more time in the woods. Now, granted, we all want to be successful, but I think you get to a point in life where you don't really judge yourself by that, and you just tend to enjoy the process more.
Yeah, I went 4 years without killing a bull elk because I was hunting one bull in particular, and finally he died of old age, or somebody else killed him, and he didn't show up. And it freed me from that and allowed me to go out and go elk hunting again. I got a real nice bull that year, but I was completely sold on trying to get that bull and that bull alone. And I got all of his sheds in the process. So, I found him in the winter and did that. But, I did not ever have a single opportunity at him with daylight. I jumped him in his bed one morning walking in there, and that was about it. And it was pretty close to private property, so he'd just bump right back over onto the private, and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But I was really driven to try to get that bull, and at the expense of going home empty-handed for a few years. But my fallback has always been winter, late season cow elk tags, and that's just a slam dunk opportunity to put meat in the freezer, and I'm perfectly content putting a cow or two in the freezer and being real picky when it comes to hunting bucks or bulls. So yeah, that's my approach now. And I shot a bull, or not a bull, but a buck last year, and it was a buck I found, I think on the 6th or 7th day of the season, of a 9-day season. And I was watching him, and he was a big, mature, heavy-bodied buck, and it was one day, all of a sudden it's just like, you know what? I really like that deer. He's an old man. He's thick as a 55-gallon drum, and he's got heavy bases. He's got some decent width, and made the decision right there. I didn't even care what he scored, and put the hammer down on him, and it was pretty fun because I hadn't killed a buck in a few years, and it was just a really satisfying moment for me. And so it was, you can't be so picky that you spend your whole adult life, just being picky. And not bringing anything home. But, you have to bring stuff home on occasion. There, it's just not hunting. You're just hiking with a rifle and watching animals. So I felt good about it.
No, that's awesome. Well, you spend a lot of your time in the kind of the high country. I mean, you hunt late season, you hunt early season, kind of all over in between. I want to talk kind of high mountain stuff. We haven't really covered a lot of that in the podcast. And I know you're very familiar in 30 years of hunting with pretty much all of the aspects of mule deer hunting. But I want to talk, kind of, I call it high mountain. I guess you can, clarify your term on that. But
yeah.
I mean, I would say you're very well qualified to speak on some high mountain hunting stuff and kind of the challenges that come with that.
Yeah, the biggest challenge here in Colorado is the altitude. And, for most people coming from a place where I live at 8,500 feet in the bottom of the valley. The valley floor is about 8,500 feet right here where I live. So the peaks around me all of them are over 13,000 feet. And timberline is right at probably 11.5, 11.6, it goes up and down depending on the terrain, but it's right in that zone is where your tree line is. Quite often you have bucks that are 11.5 to 12.5. You get much above that and you get into, mainly rocks, and there's just not enough for them to eat up higher. But, when you come up here from a low elevation terrain and trying to physically deal with that altitude, it's a really limiting factor for a lot of guys. You have to be in great condition there. And just getting into some of this stuff too, as far as backpacking away from roads and the access and everything, it's a physical process of separating yourself from the masses. And so I've got a trailhead right over here near my house, and it's a National Forest Service trailhead. If anybody wants to go there, they can go there if they want. It's called Acorn Creek, and if you want to be rubbing elbows with it's like a campground at a trailhead, and there was 20-something vehicles there for the opening of archery season last year.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine the dispersal factor of all those guys hitting the woods from that one point.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're just bumping animals away from access. And so, the guys that are willing to physically separate themselves from the masses are the ones that really are going to be more successful. And that's just the start. You have to get away from people and get to where the deer are. And then the hunting starts at that point. And, our archery season is kind of the end of the monsoon season, and you really deal with a pretty good chance of heavy thunderstorms in the mountains up at altitude almost every day of archery season. So, there's that aspect of lightning and thunderstorms, and it's really, it can affect people. So much of my experience with alpine mule deer honestly comes from sheep hunting. And sheep hunting myself or with other friends, I'm generally up in that country every year, and I live not too far from high mountains, so I spend a lot of time in the summer hiking and looking at stuff, and so I do see lots of deer, and so it's a choice I've made to do the sheep hunting and go with friends and maybe go to Alaska early and pursue big muleys later on in the fall for myself. So I think if I made a choice simply to pursue mule deer and wanted a giant buck, I think archery season is probably your best chance of killing a giant anymore, other than happenstance luck. You just can't plan on scouting out a giant mule deer when you have a 9-day season and an orange army to contend with. When you have a basin to yourself and you've actually found one, you got a much better chance of closing the deal. So,
well, I was going to get into that a little bit. I could talk about, access points and all that good stuff and your thoughts on how to get away from people. But what are some of the perks to hunting high country mule deer? I mean, other than just being in the country, I know that's what sucks a lot of guys in is just, man, the high mountain stuff is so pretty and it's, secluded. It's got all the pieces just for a great experience. But what are to you are the biggest benefits of hunting those high mountain bucks?
I think hunting early, right at the beginning of the archery opener, and being able to, if you're really after a buck early, you can scout them out and get an idea of what they're doing in those high mountain basins. And, things change rapidly. This state here, it's just not what it was a few years ago. We've got, I think the last census had 5.6 million people in Colorado. And so the Denver metro area with the majority of the population is, it's within a 3-hour drive of much of the high country in central Colorado. So you have an incredible number of recreationalists in the mountains in the summer. So, just like hunters, deer don't know any difference between a recreationalist and a hunter. It's just a human. So big old bucks, they just stay away from any place where people access for the most part. So it's become a different game with Colorado's population growth, and lots of these big deer just don't even go up in the alpine basins anymore. They'll stay in that stuff right at tree line, venture out just a little bit, or stay inside the tree level just under timberline, and it's the population in Colorado has really changed high country mule deer hunting, in my opinion. There's just so many people there. When you talk about the recreationalists from other states just coming here in the summer on vacation, it's an amazing thing now with this online computer world we're in. Everywhere you go now, every campground is booked up because you can do it online. And, it's just people come to Colorado to go have fun in the high country. So really have to work harder than you've ever to get away from people, even in these high mountains. And, it's not as easy as it once was. And the number of archery hunters out there is pretty astounding to me at this point, too. It's become, I don't want to say in vogue, but archery is just real popular with people now. And they want to get out and do it. And there's a lot of guys out there taking their bows for a hike. And, they're not, a lot of them aren't killing anything, but they're doing a really good job of bumping deer and elk all over the place.
So do you think it's changed the aspect of hunting a little bit as far as, bumping those bucks out of those high alpine, basins? I mean, there's not really that many there are a lot of high alpine basins within Colorado. We won't go that far, but there's not a lot that stay out of human traffic anymore. Like you said, there's so many people up there. Colorado has a lot of trails and a lot of systems that go into the tops of just about every mountain. And realistically, when you look at it, there's not a whole lot of those, basins that go undisturbed all summer. So, like you were mentioning, a lot of those bucks are kind of just changing their routine to live lower and live down in the brushiness and the aspens, or even down in the timber. Yeah.
And as opposed to a group of bucks laying out in the willows in an alpine basin, they're going to be, on the edge of the timber at first light and disappear into the timber at first light, as opposed to lollygagging out in the willows all day. And that's probably more of an evolution of some of these deer of how they're doing it. And, the ones that are seen are the ones that get hunted, and they're the ones that get killed too. So it's, I don't want to say you're evolving the race of mule deer, but, you're just educating them and changing their patterns over a few generations, and pretty soon they're just not doing what they used to do. So it's just happening. It's a reality of what's happening in this state, and some people need to be aware of it. Just, they're setting themselves up for disappointment if they think every alpine basin up here with willows is going to hold big bucks. It's just simply not the case. It takes work and planning to try to hunt big mule deer in the alpine. So, you look around region G and H in Wyoming, and that's kind of changed too. That's, the amount of pressure up there from residents with the oil and gas explosion of, 10, 15 years ago, that completely changed some of the dynamics with the deer up there too. These guys occasionally kill these really good deer, and, at the end of the rifle season, and nobody's seeing them early. You see these deer smarten up and disappear about the time hunting season opens up. So,
and you see that even with the G&H, how hard the tags are to get these days.
Yeah, they are for non-residents, but for residents, it's, there's a lot of guys living up there. So it's a different deal than it used to be.
So in your opinion, what's the best season to try to chase big bucks, or what's your favorite season to chase big bucks?
It's my favorite to be late season with a snowstorm, but that's just that's just asking a lot. It just makes it fun.
Yeah.
So
what is it about hunting it? See, that's kind of what gets me at this year. I don't have any mule deer hunting until probably in I guess maybe in October, but mostly late season stuff. To me, like chasing bucks, it's all about snowstorms, getting in the weather, and I love the misery. So just seeing a big old rutting buck in a snowstorm is like the epitome of what I want out of a hunting scenario.
Oh yeah, I agree. And big old dark gray thing, and and a white backdrop, and skanking around in the quaky trees and timber, and it's just that's what dreams are made of. And plus if there's lousy weather, it keeps a lot of people out of the woods. These fair weather hunters, when you have a third season in Colorado that's t-shirt weather, it's awful in my opinion. I just can't stand it. It's not just because of the conditions, it's just because there's people everywhere. And it just is amazing to me that a little bit of foul weather just completely changes it for a lot of guys. They just are not interested in getting out there and being cold and being punished, and and that's just like game on when it happens for me. It just hasn't happened that much lately. We just haven't had that many cold and snowy rifle seasons as of the last decade. It's I think maybe one or two, and it used to be just really common. So I'm not sure what this weather change is doing, or if it's just a temporary, but it's definitely happening. We're experiencing some balmy hunting conditions here in Colorado in those late seasons these days.
When you think back onto just crappy weather condition hunts, do you have a hunt that comes to mind, or a favorite, or something that pops up in the back of your head?
Yeah, there's one in particular where I think it was 2004, and we had a pretty good snowstorm coming. We knew it was coming, and so Gordon, that guy I talked about earlier, he was with me and another friend, and I'd kind of made a plan for him to take us up and drop us off, and I had some brand new tires on my truck, and we're pushing up through snow about a foot deep, and he dropped us off up on this mountain, and we're walking in the dark, and the snow's coming down still, and we're underneath the canopy of this lodgepole stuff, and just hiked our nads off all morning, and finally got to a spot, and we're taking a break, and we're sitting there eating a snack, taking a break in the morning just on this log, and I'm looking just off into the forest, and all of a sudden I see this buck come towards us. I'm like, holy crap, there's a good one. He's coming right towards us, and I said, "Buck, big buck." I jump up and grab my gun, and he saw me and took off sideways, and I threw my gun up, but it just happened way too fast. He was gone. And so I ended up tracking that buck in the snowstorm for a little while longer, and then the snowstorm broke, and it was just overcast, and spent all day on this buck's track in the snow, and went a few miles, and he's basically migrating at that point. I finally lost his track, and later on that evening, after we'd crossed the canyon, I met back up with my buddies. I spotted him laying across canyon in the aspens, and made a great long shot on him, and got him. But it was one of those things that just played out. It was so memorable, and having your buddies there and that kind of thing, it's pretty special. But if we hadn't been out in it, it wouldn't have never happened. It was one of those things that we actually saw the buck. It was behind private property, landlocked up on national forest. It took a long ways to hike in there, and without getting up early in the morning and going and doing it, it just wouldn't have happened. So so much of it has to do with putting out the effort to. When blind luck does happen to happen, it's just because you made it happen, but putting out a lot of effort. So, it's not easy for everybody to do, and I get by on hard work a lot. That it's not just about skills and great technique and everything like that. It's just working hard and keep pounding, and good stuff will happen.
I think especially with mule deer, it's just about putting the days in, number of days, whether it be scouting, if you're trying to kill them early season, or just number of days late season. When it comes to storms like that, what's your thought on hunting before a storm, after storm, during storm, all of the above? Obviously if there's the option, what in your experience of, like I said, years of chasing mule deers in the snow and in the late season, what's kind of your thoughts on timing for a storm?
Oh, if the storm breaks during the day and you're out there, it's just magic. It's if it breaks at night, the deer can be moving at night and be bedded down already at first light. But if it's been snowing in the morning and then it breaks, the rest of that day can just be absolutely magic. And that's it's really important for you to be out there in it when it does end. It's I don't think the idea of there's a big storm coming in, a low pressure, and I'm not a big believer in the deer just being up on the move. It's almost like they'd be hunkered down, in my opinion, on something like that. But when you get it seems like 8 inches is the magic number at the right time of year. You can get 8 inches of snow in early September, it won't matter. But you get 8 inches of snow anytime after about the 10th of October, and it's just game on for a migration. And the snow has to come at the right time. It doesn't mean we had a snowstorm hit October 1st last year and dumped at least 1.5 feet of snow up in the Alpine, and it didn't seem to do anything. It warmed up the next day, and the deer, they were down in the trees a little bit, but it wasn't a full blown migration or anything. I was out there helping a friend on a moose hunt in the high country, and the deer were moving around, but they definitely weren't moving out of there. So the snow has to come at the right time.
Yeah, that's interesting. You see a lot of people, and I mean, classically, you'll get usually a snowstorm, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, even in September, and doesn't really mean a whole lot. But is it like past October 10th? It seems like that's when you can start to make an impact on that. And I know, like within Montana, they'll say second storm or third storm, and then they start moving, things like that. And it seems like there's always these old school theories around storms and what's going to make the deer move. I don't know. Do you think it's a consistent thing every year, or is it a certain storm? How much science goes into that?
I'd just be guessing, to be honest. I would like to say I knew, but it's just the time of the year. You get the right, but I firmly believe about 8-9 inches of snow is what it takes. Seems like less than that they're comfortable with, but you get a little bit more, and it's just like that's the magic number to get deer on the move. And when they do start moving, they really get to moving. And I did see a migration unfold up in Wyoming once, and it was a cold storm in late September, and I'm going to guess 26th, 28th of September, and we were coming back from Alberta and driving through that stuff, and I-80 was closed in Wyoming, and it was just an ugly storm, and going down through south of Jackson through Bondurant, it was towards Pinedale. All of a sudden, we just started seeing deer coming across the highway and everything like that, and they were just bailing out of the hike country. So it was a temperature thing too. I think it was such a cold storm that it really got those deer thinking about getting out of there. So I think there's just so many variables that to have a hard and fast on anything. If you're going to have a hard and fast on anything, there better be one thing, and that's just you having the mental toughness to keep going when the conditions get shitty, and that's where you need to have a hard and fast rule. The rest is just individual animals, individual weather, individual mountains, different herds, different places. It's all different, The Book Cliffs in western Colorado, it's a low elevation stuff, but those deer will just be off the top of the Book Cliffs, by November, before the third season, and there's not even any snow up there. It's a seasonal shift. You go over in the high country of central Colorado, and you'll still have deer at 10,000 feet at Thanksgiving. So there's different herds do different things, and learning some of that stuff and being able to apply what you've learned over a long time. Those are some of the keys to being successful, and being able to consistently hunt a place year after year is probably one of the biggest factors. You learn it, you know what to do there in that particular place.
Oh, that's so much of it, and that's what I love about Montana now is that the ability to actually hunt the same unit. In Oregon, when I lived there, it's like it wasn't even a great mule deer tag, and you maybe get it hunted every 3 years or 4 years. So you never really got to truly know an area or the herd or what they're doing or anything like that. And some of the better tags are a ridiculous amount of points for what they are. Unless you're talking early season archery, but super excited this year to be able to hunt some bucks in the snow, chase them in the late season. What do you think is the biggest mistake that most guys are making when it comes to hunting later season bucks?
Not being able to stay out there, I think, is the big thing. Not being prepared, either physically, mentally, gear, any of that stuff, or being willing to do it too. Mm-hmm. So, I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and listened to some of the guys you've talked to about mule deer hunting and a couple other subjects. But one of the ones that really struck a chord with me was the guy up in Montana, Dustin Diefendorfer. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about the mental toughness, and I sometimes feel like people don't really understand what mental toughness is, and it's not just having like, hey, I'm gonna go out there and just have the grit to do it. It's you're gonna get sand kicked in your face, and it's how you deal with that. That's what it is. Mental toughness is dealing with adversity, and whatever kind of adversity is thrown at you, whether it's Mother Nature, cold, terrain, or any of that stuff. It's the guys that are able to problem solve, deal with it, and it's not even accepting the challenge. It's bouncing back, being resilient of these uncomfortable aspects of hunting, and so late season hunting takes a fair amount of resiliency, and you got to get up in the cold and even in a snowstorm and go hike up a mountain 1,500 vertical feet, and you're slogging through 10, 12 inches of snow. It's like, everybody says like, oh man, that sounds great, I'm going to do that. And hey, well, that's fine, but how come I never see anybody up there when I'm actually doing it? It's true though. I mean, there's very few guys that are actually willing to get out there and do it. And you got to be able to look at those things that are thrown at you and say, hey, I'm going to deal with that. And, part of it's a preparation thing, and is, having the gear to deal with it, having the clothes, all that. It's, I remember listening to a podcast by, I think it's Mark Warnke. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the best quotes I've ever heard, it stuck with me, and I'm going to drop an F-bomb here, but he said, it's hard to be mentally tough when you're fucking miserable. And so that just makes so much sense. And when you think about it, if you're not geared up properly and have everything you need to be out there in those conditions, it doesn't matter how mentally tough you are. Being mentally tough when you're freezing your nads off is just pretty darn challenging for a lot of people. You got to be geared up properly. You have to have spent the money on the right stuff, and something as simple as a pad to sit on that keep your butt from freezing, and being able to start a fire where you need to back in the timber, and stay out there and have a little campfire during the day, as opposed to going back to the truck and heading to the cafe to go have coffee and pancakes. It's these are all choices of when you're out there hunting and big deer, and it's it's an exposure thing. The longer you're out there doing it, the more chance you are having of running into that special animal. So you still got to make it happen when you do have that opportunity. But hunting big deer takes time, and there's no way around the application of time and the dedication to that. It's just you're just increasing your exposure out there and hoping to run into one by doing the right things at the right time. So, all this is, when I say the complete approach to hunting mountain mule deer in the book we did together, it is really a complete approach. It's, physical preparation. It's, being prepared mentally to deal with, the tough things that are thrown at you. And when you get pounded by a snowstorm or a rainstorm, being able to stick with it and, have that piece of gear in your pack that, it's going to keep you warm, and all that is all about staying out there longer and being able to have the chance at a big deer. So it's, people think there's, magic techniques or tips or anything like that, but if there's anything, you just need to be mentally tough, because you're going to deal with so much in your pursuit of big deer that, you're not going to see that many generally. You're not going to get a tag. You have to be able to go do something else and, go hunt cow elk and learn a mountain, learn an area that you're going to hunt deer someday. And, not many guys are willing to do that. I mean,
And that's the hard part about hunting big bucks is, generally speaking, if you're gonna kill a big buck, you're probably not gonna be seeing a lot of bucks. There's exception to the rule, but when you're not seeing deer, that makes all the misery even worse. And it's tough, man. It's a slog when you don't see anything for 4 days and you're miserable. Everyone likes to talk about how great hunting is until it's miserable. It can be 90. I think I can do better in the cold than I can in the heat. I was out on a scout trip this last week and, did a nice little 45 to 46 mile jaunt in 3 days, and it was 95 degrees one day. And I was kind of laughing because I was like, man, now it's just kicking up a lot of memories of that early September when things are not fun. It just...
That doesn't sound fun.
And that's, to me, that's probably much harder for me to deal with heat than it is cold. I just enjoy the cold and I love it. But
it is until you get really cold. And if you're really cold and you can't get warm,
that's true.
Man, that's horrible.
Yeah,
I've been the guy that without enough clothes and freezing my butt off up on the mountain. I generally don't do that anymore because it just sucks.
Yeah, I would say the one tip, there's nothing worse for me than not having enough sleeping bag, because I can be cold all day, but what really wears on me is when every night I'm freezing to death and I got all my puffy, almost every layer on, and I'm still freezing every single night. That wears on me a lot. I can hike and stay warm and be underclothed in the daytime, but man, I do a lot better if I'm overheating every night and when it's cold out.
Yeah, that 10 extra ounces of warmer sleeping bag probably would have been
so worth it.
Yeah, I've been there too. I got one of those big Agnes sleep systems a few years back when they first came out, where you slip the insulated pad into the bottom of your sleeping bag. You don't really have a bottom of your sleeping bag. And I was up in Alaska on a Dall sheep hunt. It was the tail end of sheep season, and it ends on September 20th, and it was probably the 16th, 17th, and it started getting cold, and I froze my butt off in that thing. I thought, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever done, is bring this sleeping bag on a late season hunt. And, it's rated to, a temperature that should have been comfortable, but it wasn't, and I'd never tried it out in there. But, those make for some miserable nights of sleep when you're cold like that. You're not getting enough rest, and it affects you the next day too.
Oh, it affects your decision making. Not to mention getting up the next day sucks when you haven't slept. But yeah, then you make bad decisions. You're always tired. I will say one tip, I have for if you ever get in that situation where you're freezing every night and you have a Nalgene, you can boil water in your jet boil, put it in your Nalgene and put it in the bottom of your sleeping bag. That tends to help a little bit, kind of warm you up. I've
threatened to do that. I've never, usually by the time I'm in bed, I don't feel like getting out of the sleeping bag for anything, including that. And it seems like you just suffer instead. But yeah, one of those things, that's definitely on my toolbox tip list in the back of my mind. I've never done it, but I think if I ever really got really, really cold, I think that'd be a good thing to do. It's a smart.
I've done it on a hunt that I didn't even need to. It wasn't even in the backcountry. We were truck hunting, and I tried that out just to see if it worked, and it worked for sure. But generally speaking, I don't pack a Nalgene into the backcountry because it's just excess weight that I don't need. But when you talk about getting the rest and everything in the decision making, it's not so much that you make maybe decisions that would put your life in jeopardy or bad decisions like that. It's what you do. You start making deals with yourself, and those are the. When you talk about being mentally tough, you make concessions and say, it's cold, I should probably go, and, that kind of thing. And you start rationalizing giving up. Mm-hmm. And it makes it easier to do when those choices are easier when you're miserable. And then you get home and you're thinking, why in the hell did I leave? You got to live with it for the rest of the year until next season. And those are, that's when it's tough. It's not tough at the time. You want to be comfortable and you want to be warm. You're tired. You miss your family, all those things. And you go home and the first thing you think about is, God, I wish I was still back up there. Do you have any moments where you gave up or quit early that's sticking in the back of your mind and maybe help you push you forward?
Nothing that's No, generally I'm stupid enough to keep going, and so I probably have more bad memories of going too far and pushing it a little too far, and that kind of thing. And so sometimes doing that, you put yourself in a position where you could get hurt or worse, and so those are, when I think back about memories like that, that's probably more of the case of quote unquote bad memories about something. But I've been with friends that didn't want to keep going, and we're after a certain animal, and they're just like, I don't have it in me, I don't want to do it, and I had to respect what they're doing. But if it was me, I would have like, no, I'm going after that ram or that buck, or that's it. I'm not giving up. But when it's somebody else's hunt, that's different. So I think about a ram that I helped a buddy hunt back in the San Juans years ago, and for me it would have been that ram or nothing, and he conceded and shot a ram that made him happy towards the end of the hunt. But it was it wouldn't have been me. I would have kept hunting for that particular ram, and so it can go both ways.
How much I know you spend quite a bit of time, helping sheep hunts or doing sheep hunts, things like that. How much has your mule deer experience over the years helped your sheep hunting and vice versa?
I think more sheep hunting helping mule deer hunting, to be honest. And it's a patience thing probably more than anything. And when I'm younger, I was more prone to put more miles in and do some quick glassing, and I was very confident in my eyesight and my game spotting ability, and probably to the point of walking or glassing past certain things. And so the patience to pick apart stuff has probably come, I think it's a part of an aging process too, where you get older and you don't feel like you need to cover as much country, and so there's probably that too. But I think many of the tools you take to the mountain with you, they work for everything. And, it's, like I said, I think the biggest tool that you have is resiliency and dealing with adversity and the stuff you're dealt when you're up there. And so if you're able to do that kind of thing, it works for all species, I think. And, it's a patience and dedicating the time are probably the two most important characteristics a guy needs to take to the mountain with him.
Which is funny when you talk about resiliency and mental toughness and these things. And I consider myself a pretty mentally tough person, but if you made me sit down in one place for too long, I would lose my mind. And so I guess that makes me not mentally tough. And it's interesting because it's one of the things I know I need to work on. I know, you look at the greats, the, great hunters and those who have done it a hell of a lot longer than I have. And they'll tell you, use your glass more, spend more time in the glass, just obsessively talking about glassing more, spending more time, just picking stuff apart. But I guess when it comes to mental toughness, is probably one thing that I need to work on is forcing myself to sit in one place, to glass longer.
Well, I couldn't take naps when I was younger, when I was out in the field. I'd be sitting there looking around. I'm like, my buddies would be napping, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm just too excited to be here and hoping to see a big buck. And so, there's a little bit of that is kind of the same thing where, I'd be sitting there and I feel like I've seen everything. I want to walk around the next hill and, my buddy's sacked out next to me, just getting a nice little nap. And, he's recharging his battery and I'm sitting here wearing my battery down further. So, that's, I get it completely. It is patience is a skill, but it's also, I think it's something that, the older you get, I think people develop more patience. It's simply by, you just don't have as much energy when you get older either. There's no doubt about that. There's occasional freaks of nature that are these freaking wound tighter than a $2 watch old guys, but, they're also going to bed at, 7:30 at night and waking up at 5:30 in the morning too. Yeah. So.
So what advice would you give your younger self, say your 25-year-old self, when it comes to hunting and just your approach to it? What advice, if you could go back in time, would you give yourself?
Probably hunt a little higher. That's definitely one of them. And, I think I would have been putting in for tags that I didn't put in, and now it's pointless to do it. I wish I would have been into the point game in Wyoming and Arizona right off the bat. I've got a few points in Arizona right now, but really it's just token at best. And the guys that have max points for sheep in Wyoming and stuff like that. That's I wish I would have been one of those guys, but it's, I don't have a lot of regrets just because I don't really think of I regret selling my baseball cards, but as far as doing some other things, it's, I feel okay about how things went. I think I enjoyed a nice evolution as a hunter. One of the things I did was I paid some price and blood and sweat for many years of not getting anything. When I finally start getting successful, it was so fulfilling. It was just an incredible feeling. Mm-hmm. And I killed my second biggest buck ever in my bighorn sheep in the same year, and it just was, I felt like I had arrived. And I finally killed a really big bull on an over-the-counter unit here in Colorado. It was just like, man, I felt like I'd climbed Mount Everest. Yeah. Here's a unit that people have trouble killing raghorns, and I kill a 370 bull in the late season. It's a bull I'd watched from the year before and all winter and picked up his sheds. It was like, man, I felt like I climbed the mountain and rang the bell. And so, and if I'd killed, 7 350 plus bulls in 5 different states, it wouldn't have been the same. Mm-hmm. And not to take anything away from somebody that's done that, but to do something really special once, it really adds to how you feel about things and the way you're able to reflect on stuff too. And so you truly appreciate those substantial accomplishments when you do get them. And so it's I've had some Mount Everest and that kind of thing, and I feel like very satisfied where I'm at this point in my life and what I've done. I like to have killed some other big animals along the way, but I don't have any regrets, and I have the perspective to know that there's a lot of guys that haven't even done close to what I've done, and so not really having many regrets or complaints about anything is, it's a good mindset to have at this point. So
no, absolutely.
I do regret. I had a guy once email me a picture of a double drop tine, non-typical mule deer and velvet in the San Juans, and I was so caught up in wanting to get a doll sheep at that point in my life that I didn't think about how much I should have. He put an X on a map and sent me the picture of this deer, and you think about, here's a 220 to 230 double drop tine non-typical. The guy marks an X on a map, and he probably didn't get killed, and he was probably there the next year in the same exact spot. If I had advice to my younger self, I'd say, you should have went after that deer.
What was the context of that? Some random guy just sent you a big buck?
Well, it was just one of those things that, I was writing for Eastman's then, had a little bit of notoriety, and just, it is, and mm-hmm. before even social media really took place, it was, an internet forum-based world, and emails and hunting forums were pretty much it. So, just striking up a conversation with somebody or, that kind of thing. And so he just wanted to share. And, he was elk hunting in this spot and just wanted to tell me about this big buck he saw.
That's pretty cool.
He freaking gave me a gift, and I was dumb enough not to take advantage of it. So
you must have, see, you're just bitten by that sheep bug.
Oh, it was pretty bad. Yeah.
So do you still have the sheep bug over the mule deer?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's nothing like backpack hunting for doll sheep, and those guys that have moved up in Alaska and made a passion of it, they know.
Yeah.
That's something special. It's we can all talk about the things we do down here, but man, that country is so big, so awesome, so wild, and then doll sheep in that it can't be that hard. They're white sheep in a gray and green world. Well, it is that hard. It's something else though, man. To me, that's the greatest adventure in North America, is strapping on a backpack and going up into the glacier country of Alaska after doll sheep. So.
Yeah, Man, I would love to get up there and do that someday. One of these days.
It's really almost beyond the means of working class guys. It's just.
Yeah, that's the problem. It just keeps getting up in price.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you have to move up there like everyone. Well, a lot of these guys that move up there just so they can do it. There might be something to that.
Yeah. That might have been some advice to give my younger self is move to Alaska.
Move to Alaska so you can be a sheep hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. Selling my baseball cards. That's the big regret.
What was the best baseball card you wish you had back?
Oh, I had some serious baseball cards. So I had stuff from the late 60s, early 70s, and Roberto Clemente rookie card, Pete Rose rookie card, Tom Seaver. It was just stupid, and I sold them for rent when I was, 22, maybe. So I think I had just literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of cards if I knew then what I know now. So even with that's the one big regret I have. So
I had a pile of cards growing up, and I still to this day don't know whatever happened to those. I don't remember ever selling them.
Yeah,
my mom probably threw them away or something when I went to college.
Probably,
which is even worse.
You just should have cleaned up your room, kid.
Yeah, no kidding. I guess that's what I get.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Let's talk about your book a little bit. I mean, anything you want to say about the book? We didn't really touch on a whole lot about it. So, my perspective, like I said, awesome book, start to finish. It's kind of the whole complete guide. You and David crushed it again. What else do you want to add about the book?
Well, I do think, it's something that, even experienced hunters can get some information that's practical out of it. And I think if you're new into the game, there's some really valuable information a guy can get from it. And it's not just tactics, but it's, like I said, it's the complete approach. And so people have to understand this world is changing and opportunity is being limited. So when you have the ability to shorten your learning curve to a certain extent with this book, and there's nothing to replace the actual years and spent and time on the mountain. That there's nothing that you could do as far as reading a book that's going to, it's like telling a pilot, giving somebody a manual on how to fly a plane versus a guy that's been in the air for years. There's just, you just can't. Shortcuts really are hard to come by for, something that's, as special as big mule deer. And so, but this does give you information that both David and I have learned from years and years of doing it. And so, you take and look at some of the anecdotes in the books that we have of success and failure. And so, there is something to learn in every hunt. I've learned just as much from failure as I have from success. And, to be able to think, it's a thinking man's game, and to be able to reflect on what happened and apply it in the future, those are all things that are really important to the development of anybody as a hunter. And it's not just rifle hiking in good country. It's, there's a process and it's something that you learn over time. So, if there were shortcuts, people would be taking them, but, it's not that easy. It's something it's a learning process.
No, absolutely. And I think, a lot of what I've learned, I remember when I first I've kind of always been into hunting. When I first got really serious about my approach to it and started just consuming everything I possibly get my hands on, it changes how you do things after that from there on forward. And so you're learning from guys' experience that have years and years and years ahead of you and just things you can't learn just by doing. You have to do both, yes. You can't just learn by being in a book, but you're going to learn much quicker in the woods when you have, all of this experience and things that are pointed out to you from just consuming so much information. And like I said, I've freaking consumed so many books over the years, and still to this day, reading this book, there's a ton of information in this book. Awesome book. You guys did, like I said, you crushed it. But there's always little things you can pick up. I mean, I do podcasts all the time. Like I said, we're over 250 podcasts deep, and I still pick up little tidbits of information. And I always smile, man. I'm like, man, that has never been said on the podcast, and all these little things that still pop up. So yeah, if you want to be a great mule deer hunter, you want to be a great hunter, read everything you can, consume as much information from those ahead of you or those before you. And that's the best way I can say to go about it.
One of the most difficult things people will find and is the idea of passing deer up and going home empty-handed. Mm-hmm. And that is probably, in my mind, one of the most difficult things for many people to do. I don't have that problem, obviously, if I've only killed 2 deer in the last 10 years. But along the way, I should have taken some of those bucks, like I said. But when you start thinking about, say there's $25 per 100 does, and there's 300 deer in your area, there's $75, and 50 of those bucks are going to be 2-year-old, 3-year-old deer. So that only leaves maybe 15 to 20 probably of anything over 4 years old. And then if you're looking for a giant, how many of those 15 or 20 are actually a giant deer? Maybe none. Mm-hmm. And even if you went out on the winter range looking for a special deer like that, you might not even see one in that area. So, to pursue bucks of, really high caliber, it's really a dedication to really what you want. And if you're going to be shooting younger bucks, you are not going to be running into that special buck by shooting a 3-year-old on day 3. And people talk about like classes of deer, 160, 170, 180, all that kind of thing. To be honest, I'm just guessing. I don't actually know what a 160 buck is if I had to point them out, even though I'm a Boone and Crockett score, because I've never taped one, and I just don't. But what I do know is, 2 and 3-year-old bucks I'm not going to shoot, and I'm assuming those are 160 bucks, and that's, you're not going to kill a 180 buck in every unit either. They might not be there. Yeah. So, the genetics, trying to kill a 180 buck in the Missouri breaks of eastern Montana is different than trying to kill a 180 buck in Unit 44. You might have a 9-year-old buck in Montana that's not going to be 180, and you might have a 3-year-old in Eagle County that might be 180. So it's genetics are different, and simply hunting for old deer I think is the most important thing. So for me, anyways, that's not that I'm saying everybody needs to do that, but you got to be able to set your standards and stick to them. If you don't, you keep conceding, then you're not going to kill those old bucks.
Yeah, I just out of curiosity, do you fancy an area with good genetics over, say, an area that has that security to grow, or I guess the remoteness to grow older bucks?
Yes, unequivocally. So there's, when you have, my biggest deer is a 5-year-old. So he's got a 216 mainframe and gross mainframe, and he's 38.5 wide, and he's 5 years old, tooth aged.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? That's just, some of those deer you've seen come off the Arizona Strip at, 4 or 5-year-old deer. There was one that was almost 300 inches that was 5 years old. He had the right genetics, and so you might not ever find. Mm-hmm. When you hunt an area of great genetics, then you have a better chance of finding an old deer that's a super deer. There could be a super deer in an area of poor genetics simply by the freak of nature aspect of it. Like the 7-foot Chinese guy or whatever. It's more common now than it used to be, but a 7-foot Chinese guy is pretty damn unusual. So hunting an area that's got good genetics to me is pretty important. Those guys that are able to hunt down there on the Arizona Strip, I call it the mule deer Disneyland, and what happens down there every year just boggles my mind. More big non-typicals are killed there than most of the rest of the West put together. It's just almost unfathomable what happens down there. But
yeah, the problem is like there you see. I think with elk, it seems like a good genetic area can still happen outside of a ridiculously hard draw area, but it seems less possible with, say, mule deer. It seems like most of the good, and maybe this is just my naivete, is that maybe there are some areas, but it seems like most of the areas with quote unquote good genetics are skyrocketing in point creep to where you can't even have them anymore anyway.
Oh yeah. I've had 2 44 tags in the last 10 years, I think, and I didn't shoot a deer on either one of them.
Just really?
I was picky, yeah. So, probably will never hunt there again just because it's so difficult to draw a tag at this point. Part of it is just because the tag numbers are still real low in there from the winter of 2007, 2008. But, I know that, holding out for that unit versus hunting somewhere else is, 15 times somewhere else, or is holding out for that unit one time is, I've got much better odds of finding a deer I want hunting 15 years in another place than hunting 1 year there. So
yeah,
there's you have to be really practical about your approach. There's some great units that you can have with 1-2 points if you're willing to archery hunt. And so I would strongly suggest that anybody, instead of holding out for those tags, just go hunting and get a tag every other year. And even if it's muzzleloader archery, and just dedicate yourself to that, as opposed to, trying to get that 3rd or 4th season special tag once in 15 years. That just does not make any sense to me at all. Because another reason you've not been able to hone your skills along the way. And so
because if you only get a hunt every 10 years, you're not going to be a very good hunter.
No, not at all. And hunting over-the-counter bulls, there's something to be said for that in Colorado, because they're tough to kill here.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So not a lot of guys want to do it, but they want their mule deer tags. But you can be out there hunting and get an elk tag and go and learn your area just by over-the-counter elk hunting. So I see a lot of animals that way. When anywhere whether I'm sheep hunting up in the Alpine or elk hunting, I'm still looking for deer.
Yeah.
So it's not like I close my eyes to deer when I go after something else.
That's true. Well, we're going to link to your book, The Edge, The Complete Approach to Hunting Mountain Mule Deer. Is there anything else you want to ask of our audience, or anything you want to direct them towards?
Yeah, I'd say I think guys need to be reasonable with what they have as far as their expectations in this day and age, and don't be hung up too much about score. Be hung up about the experience and the dedication to the craft of hunting big bucks. And if you want to kill a big buck, pass those little guys up. Let them go hunt a cow elk and bring your meat home that way. So I don't want to take anything away from anybody shooting a deer. And if they're proud of it, that's their own personal choice. But I'd like to see people be conservative when it comes to mule deer and not shoot little bucks just to fill a tag and say, I got my buck. It's, we're in a day and age where a mule deer is a limited resource, and it seems like there's less of them in different places every year. So, I think that would be my suggestion to people is, don't do it just because you want to say, I got my buck. Do it because you really want it. So.
Plus, elk meat tastes way better than mule deer, so there's that.
Yeah. I've heard otherwise from a couple people, but I don't know what that sense that makes. I've eaten a lot of both.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for jumping on. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And everybody go check out his book, The Edge. I think you guys really enjoy it. But thank you again, Mike.
Yep, it's being sold through Western Hunter magazine. So we'll get a link to the website for their store page, and if you pass that along to everybody, that'd be great. Appreciate it.
Perfect. We'll add a link right in the show notes, and everybody can grab it right there. But thanks again, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Cody.
Today's podcast brought to you by Solo Targets. Solo Targets are life-size, ultra-realistic 2D targets. And I've been obsessed with the Solo Targets and love the realism of having to pick a spot on an animal and not just shoot a dot on a block. The Solo Targets, you can turn any block into a ultra-realistic hunting scenario for much, much cheaper than a 3D target. And preferably, I think I prefer them over shooting a 3D target. I also really like that all the targets are actually life size, which really gives you a feel for what an animal is going to look like in your sights at different yardages. I just got the new mule deer buck target, and the thing is badass. The target alone will give you buck fever. It's a giant buck. We set it up in the field and with just a small block target behind it, which it adds that realistic pressure of having to hit the vitals, because if you hit anywhere else, you're not going to hit the block that's behind it. It is so fun. Just that added little bit of pressure makes you really hone in on that target, and it adds to that little buck fever scenario, puts the pressure on, so to speak. Head over to solotargets.com. Check them out. Awesome. They got elk targets, they got antelope targets, mule deer targets, all kinds of cool stuff, sheep, bear, all kinds of great targets. Use the Rich Outdoors promo code TRO and you'll get 20% off your new badass target system. This episode is brought to you by GoHunt.com. GoHunt's Insider Membership is a membership that gives you access to so many tools to help you become a better hunter. I know you guys hear me talk about this all the time, and you probably hear it on every other podcast too, but if you're not a member yet, you're missing out on a great resource. GoHunt.com is easily one of my favorite tools for finding and researching hunts, but it's so much more than that. Having access to the knowledge base and articles is super valuable. And when you become a member, you get even more benefits like points back on gear from the Go Hunt Gear Shop. Heck, just the prices at the gear shop alone are worth the membership. Go Hunt is currently offering a free trial. So if you've always wondered if this Go Hunt thing is worth the money, now is your chance to test it out for free. Try it out and I promise you will be hooked. This tool will save you so much time and effort on researching hunts. Not to mention you will find hunts that you never even knew about. Just go to gohunt.com/TRO and sign up for a free trial. If you sign up for a free trial, I'll send you a TRO podcast decal, and I'll send you the tutorial on how I use Go Hunt to find hidden gem units. That's gohunt.com/TRO. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast and to Muley Monday. If you like this episode and you learned something along the way, be sure to share the podcast with a hunting buddy. And if you get a chance, leave us a review on iTunes, on Stitcher, wherever you listen to the podcast. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.